Off the coast of Vietnam, dozens of helicopters rest on the ocean floor. A graveyard, a reminder of one of the darkest days in history. Rusted rotors, sharks, and bodies. Shortly after dawn on April 29, 1975, the sky above Saigon darkened. A line of storms moved in from the South China Sea, flattening the horizon into a single band of gray. To many inside the city, it felt like weather. To others, it felt like a deadline. By then, the war had already reached its conclusion. North Vietnamese forces were less than 30 miles away. Artillery could be heard in the distance. The night before, rockets had struck Tan Son Nhut Air Base, closing Saigon's last fixed-wing runway. The city was sealed. What remained was evacuation by air, vertical, improvised, uncertain. At 10:48 a.m., a coded message went out over Armed Forces radio, the repeated playing of White Christmas. It was late April. No one misunderstood its meaning. The evacuation had begun. The helicopters arrived in waves. They lifted from rooftops, embassy courtyards, apartment buildings, and empty lots scraped into landing zones. Each descent drew crowds. Each ascent left people behind. Marine guards tried to keep order, but the city pressed inward. Documents were checked. Names were called. Some were waved forward. Others were turned away. At the U.S. Embassy, the gates buckled under the weight of the crowd. Families passed children overhead. Clerks destroyed documents inside the building as rotor wash shook the walls. A Marine later recalled that the sound of the helicopters never stopped. It simply moved higher and farther away. Historian Stanley Carnow later wrote that Saigon did not collapse in chaos, but in compression. A city being squeezed upward, one helicopter at a time. Offshore, the evacuation continued at sea. American naval vessels filled the horizon, their decks already crowded. Helicopters arrived faster than they could be cleared. Once passengers disembarked, crews pushed aircraft overboard to make room for the next landing. The ocean filled with metal frames and spinning rotors, sinking beneath the surface. The urgency allowed no alternatives. Beyond the embassy, the flight was wider and more desperate. South Vietnamese naval ships fled the coast, packed far beyond capacity. Fishing boats followed barges, anything that floated. One aging World War II-era vessel carried several thousand refugees despite failing engines and limited fuel. Survivors later described standing for days without space to sit, without fresh water, without shelter from the sun. Children were lost in the crowd. Some slipped from arms into the sea. Others were handed to strangers in the hope that anyone would reach safety. A South Vietnamese officer later recalled, there were no ranks anymore. As night fell, the storm arrived. Rain swept across the decks. Helicopters flew blind through low cloud and darkness, guided by deck lights and radio signals. Marines formed human chains to guide evacuees forward. The sea rose. The decks grew slick. Still the helicopters came. Inside the city, those left behind listened as the sound receded. By early morning on April 30th, the final American helicopters lifted off. A flag was folded, the gates were closed. Saigon was quiet. Later that morning, North Vietnamese tanks entered the city. The government of South Vietnam surrendered. The war ended not with a final battle, but with absence. The fall of Saigon marked the end of the Vietnam War. For nations, it was a geopolitical conclusion. For those who lived that day, it was defined by moments measured in seconds. by crowded decks, slipping hands, and helicopters disappearing into rain. Saigon did not fall all at once. It emptied. And when it was over, the storm moved inland, and the city remained